I always thought I'd feel whole on my wedding day. At least, that's what they say, right? That when you find your person, your chosen one, all the broken parts inside you begin to click back into place. You forget the hurt. You forgive the past. You finally feel enough. But even as I stood under the mandip, dressed in a cream gold sherwani stitched with 1,000 ancestral threads, all I could feel was a quiet chaos inside me. Like a storm had been waiting just behind my ribs, patiently, for this very day to strike. The incense curled into the air. The sacred fire crackled beside us. Mira stood opposite me, glowing, wrapped in red and gold. Her eyes shimmered with happiness. I should have mirrored that. I should have smiled more. But somewhere behind my practiced smile, something kept tugging, like a memory I couldn't quite reach. That morning, my father hadn't come to see me. He hadn't said a word about how I looked, hadn't touched my shoulder, hadn't smiled. Nothing. I told myself it didn't matter. It was who he was. Sudeep Roy, businessman, widower, and emotional recluse. We hadn't had a real conversation in years. After Maud died, he shut himself off from the world and buried himself in silence. I stopped trying. Until today. Because today, I was becoming a husband. And for once in my life, I wanted my father to look at me and say, "I'm proud of you." But I didn't get that. What I got instead was a stranger. The rituals were nearly done. The Shubho Drishti, the garlands, the 7 sacred steps, done. The air was thick with marigold petals, smoke, and joy. The priest's voice boomed with mantras as guests crowded around us with phones, flashes, laughter. Then I saw him. A tall man in his late 50s. Faded gray kurta, thin-framed spectacles, eyes like mine, strikingly like mine. I frowned. He stood beside my father. Sudeep had a hand on the man's shoulder and was waving the photographer over. Something in my chest snapped to attention. "Aaron!" My father's voice called out above the murmurs. I turned toward him, still half-seated beside Mira. He cleared his throat, straightened his sherwani stiffly, and then, like he was announcing the weather, said, "Everyone, this man here is Aaron's real father." I didn't hear the collective gasp. Didn't hear Mira whisper, "What?" Didn't hear the priest choke on his own prayer. All I heard was the cracking sound in my own mind, like a mirror breaking inward. I stood up, dizzy, trying to find logic where there was none. "What the hell are you talking about?" I said. My voice sounded small. Too small. Sudeep didn't flinch. He merely stepped aside. "This is Animesh Dutta," he said. "He's your biological father." And just like that, my wedding turned into a funeral. For everything I thought I knew. The man, Animesh, looked haunted. He didn't reach out to me. Didn't smile. He held something in his hand, an envelope, maybe, but kept it close to his chest like it would burn if he offered it. I stared at him. Then at my father. Then at Mira, who had stood up beside me, trembling. "Is this a joke?" I asked. But no one laughed. An uncle muttered behind me. A cousin whispered something obscene. The priest was gathering his things like a bomb had gone off. "Why now?" I asked. "Why today?" My father looked away, as if bored. "You deserve the truth," he said. "No," I said. "You wanted to ruin this. You wanted to humiliate me." He didn't deny it. Just walked off toward the edge of the crowd, leaving chaos behind him like he always did. Mira grabbed my hand. "Aaron," she said gently, "come with me. We can go inside. We can figure this out later." But I couldn't move. My feet were planted, like the earth had opened and swallowed half of me. A camera flash went off. I looked at Animesh again. Still no words from him. Just that envelope. Finally, he held it out. I hesitated. Then took it. Our fingers brushed. His were cold. He opened his mouth. But whatever he wanted to say, he swallowed it, turned, and left. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in a hotel room paid for by Mira's family, in a sherwani that now felt like a costume on a stranger's body. The envelope lay on the table in front of me. I stared at it for hours before opening it. Inside was a letter. The ink had bled slightly with age. It was from my mother. "My darling Aaron, I don't know when you'll read this, or if. But if you do, I want you to know, I loved you more than I loved the truth. That's why I couldn't tell you. I was scared. Scared of what your father would do. Scared you'd hate me. Scared that love wouldn't be enough to protect you from what they might say. But your real father, he loved music. He loved you, though from afar. His name is Animesh. And if he ever finds you, please don't hate him. Please don't hate me." I dropped the letter. Suddenly I couldn't breathe. All these years. All these birthdays where Sudeep never smiled. All those bruises. All the silence. And now this? A man appears. A truth explodes. A love collapses. Was my entire life just a house of cards? I should have felt rage. But all I felt was grief. Grief for the boy I used to be. Grief for the woman who died carrying secrets. Grief for the man I thought was my father. And grief for the man who might have been, but never was. The storm in my chest had finally broken. They say your whole life flashes before your eyes before you die. That didn't happen to me. But something else did. After my wedding shattered like glass under a boot, after my mother's secret ripped through my soul, I didn't see my life flash. I felt it. Every wound. Every lie. Every ache I had buried and sealed away began to crawl back into my skin like it had been waiting for the invitation. And it all started with the eyes. The eyes of the stranger, Animesh Dutta. The man who stood beside my father and watched my life collapse. The man who didn't say a word. But his eyes spoke. They were my eyes. That was the worst part. They looked like mine. Or maybe I looked like his. I sat alone in the hotel lobby the next morning. The wedding decorations were still up. The marigold garlands had wilted. Guests had left in silence, some with gossip, some with pity. Mira hadn't called. I didn't blame her. What do you even say to the man who vanished during his own wedding? I stared at my reflection in the tinted glass of the lobby window. And all I could see were his eyes. I wasn't always like this. As a kid, I used to believe people were exactly who they said they were. When my mother tucked me in and whispered, "Your father loves you. He just doesn't know how to show it," I believed her. Even when Sudeep slapped me across the face for forgetting his shoes at the temple. Even when he refused to come to my school exhibitions. Even when he looked at me like I was a burden he never chose. I still believed her. Because my mother never lied. Except, now I knew she did. She lied about the most fundamental truth of my existence. My blood. My name. My father. I took the letter out again. Read it like it would somehow change. Like the words would rewrite themselves, and all of this would turn out to be a misunderstanding. But it didn't. If he ever finds you, please don't hate him. Please don't hate me. Was that all I was left with? A letter from a ghost? And two fathers, one who raised me with resentment, the other who stayed hidden behind silence. I couldn't stay in that hotel room another minute. So I went back home. Or at least, the place that used to feel like home. My father's house. I hadn't spoken to Sudeep since the wedding. I walked in without knocking. The old caretaker, Bolida, looked up at me and simply said, "He's in the study." I don't remember climbing the stairs. I just remember standing at the doorway, watching Sudeep pour himself a drink like it was just another Tuesday. "You destroyed everything," I said. He didn't look at me. He took a sip, sat down. Then finally he said, "You weren't supposed to find out like that." I laughed. It sounded more like a cough. Right. Because announcing it in front of 300 people was so subtle. He didn't even flinch. He showed up. Said he wanted to see you once. I thought, why not? Let's get it over with. Get it over with, I whispered. You're talking about my entire existence. You're still alive, aren't you? He muttered. Still have your job. Your face. Your house. What difference does it make? What difference? I stepped forward. You've hated me my whole life. And now I know why. He looked up sharply. I didn't hate you, he snapped. I hated what you reminded me of. I didn't have a reply to that. He looked older. Tired. Like something inside him had dried up long ago, and he had learned to live without it. I raised you, didn't I? He asked, quieter now. No, I said. You tolerated me. He didn't respond. I turned to leave. But just before I did, he said something that stopped me cold. You look like him, you know. That night, I dreamed of my mother. She stood on the balcony, her dupatta fluttering like a flag of surrender, singing to the moon. She used to do that when I was little, humming Rabindra Sangeet like it was her secret lullaby to the universe. In the dream, I asked her, Why didn't you tell me? She smiled. Because sometimes, Aaron, truth is a thief. It doesn't give. It only takes. The next day, I woke up with a plan. I was going to find Animesh Dutta. I didn't know what I would say. I didn't know if I wanted to forgive him or scream at him. All I knew was that I needed to look into those eyes again. Not just to know who he was, but to finally understand who I am. There are moments in life when you can feel your own heart beating, but not in your chest. You feel it in your throat, in your temples, in the tips of your fingers. Like your body is reminding you, you're still here. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. That's what I felt when I reread my mother's letter. A third time. A fourth. Not for clarity. Not for comfort. But because part of me still believed that if I read it just once more, I might understand how she could love me so much, and still keep me in the dark. The letter was dated April 9th, 2006. I was 8 years old. She would have still been alive. She would have still been humming songs in the kitchen, and combing my hair for school and pretending everything was okay. I tried to picture her writing this. Late at night. In secret. Looking over her shoulder in case Sudeep came home early. Did her hand shake? Did she cry after sealing the envelope? The last line kept echoing in my head. Please don't hate me. But I didn't. That was the worst part. I didn't hate her. I wanted to. I tried. But no matter how many lies her silence held, she was still the only person who made me feel like I mattered. And now, all I had left of her were pages. I couldn't sleep that night. At 2:37 a.m., I sat on the cold floor of the living room in my childhood home, the lights off, the city muted outside. I had taken out the old photo albums. There weren't many. Sudeep never liked photos. But there were a few, moments captured in frames that now felt too loud for their own stillness. There was one of me at 4 years old, sitting on Jaya's lap in Victoria Memorial Gardens, her smile wide, mine absent. I was staring off at something in the distance, something that looked like confusion. It struck me then, I had never seen a single photo of Sudeep holding me. Not even once. I flipped another page and found one I'd never noticed before. A black and white photo, almost hidden behind a plastic flap. It wasn't labeled. But it was him. Animate. Younger. Guitar slung over his shoulder. Standing next to Jaya. Both were barefoot, smiling like they belonged to a different world. A freer one. Suddenly, the letter made sense in a way it hadn't before. Dear Aaron, his name is Animesh. He used to play the sitar under the banyan tree in Shantiniketan. He played like the world wasn't watching, like he didn't belong to time. I was 17. He was music. Your grandfather hated him. Said he wasn't respectable. So he found me a husband who wore suits and signed contracts and came from a proper Bengali lineage. I did what I was told. I left Animesh. 2 weeks after my wedding, I found out I was pregnant. I never told Sudeep. But somehow, I think he always knew. That line broke something in me. Somehow, I think he always knew. It explained everything. The glares. The distance. The subtle punishments wrapped in cold silence. I was never Sudeep Roy's son. I was his prison sentence. The next morning, I packed a small bag. I didn't call Mira. I didn't tell Sudeep. I left a note for Bulita that simply said, "Gone to find something I lost before I was born." I took the earliest train to Shantiniketan. I didn't know where he lived. I didn't even know if he'd want to see me. But I had his name. And that was more than I'd ever had before. The ride was long and quiet. The train rattled like it had a secret it didn't want to spill. Outside the window, Bengal blurred past in soft strokes of green and brown. Fields. Trees. People who didn't know me. People who didn't know I had just found out my entire life was built on the absence of a name. And somehow, all I could think about was Mira. Not the wedding. Not the crowd. But how her fingers trembled when she reached for mine. How she whispered, "Let's go inside, Aaron. We can fix this." And how I didn't. Because part of me was still that little boy waiting for his father to say, "I see you." And now, two men stood on either side of my name, one who raised me with resentment, and one who disappeared into silence. When I finally reached Shantiniketan, the town looked nothing like my life. It was still. Kind. Quiet. People moved like they were part of the soil and sky. I asked a shopkeeper if he knew a man named Animesh Dutta. He nodded. "Music teacher," he said. "He stays near the old banyan, past the Visvabharati field." My heart slammed against my ribs. The banyan tree. Just like in the letter. I walked through the red dust path until I saw him. Animesh was sitting on a low stool, teaching 4 children how to pluck the sitar. His hands were careful. His voice soft. He hadn't aged well. His hair was more white than black. His face was lined like paper that had been folded too many times. But it was him. There was no doubt. I didn't say his name. I just stood there, watching him. And then, without turning, he said, "You came." My breath caught. He turned slowly. Our eyes met again. And this time, I didn't see a stranger. I saw a man who had been holding his own grief for 27 years, just like me. "I wasn't sure," he whispered. "If you'd want to know me." I stepped closer. My voice cracked when I finally spoke. "I don't know what I want." He nodded. "That's fair." Then he paused. And added, "Would you like some tea?" And just like that, I nodded. Because sometimes, even the deepest wounds don't need bandages. They just need a beginning. There's a strange thing about grief. It doesn't just arrive when someone dies. Sometimes, it arrives years later, long after the body is gone. Sometimes, it comes when you realize the person who raised you never loved you at all. That's what I felt when I returned to Kolkata, grieving for a childhood I thought I had, and mourning a version of Sudeep Roy that never existed. The train ride back from Shantiniketan was quiet, but my mind wasn't. Every word Animesh had spoken stayed etched in my head like carvings in stone. He didn't cry. He didn't plead. He didn't even try to explain away his absence. He just said, "I wanted to fight for her. But her family threatened to ruin me. And when she married someone else, I left, not because I stopped loving her, but because I didn't want you to grow up watching me lose." There was honesty in that. A kind of weakness, yes. But also, tenderness. The kind Sudeep never gave. I remember being 10, running home from school to show my art project. It was a miniature of Tagore's house made with cardboard and glue. I'd stayed up till 2 a.m. to finish it. Sudeep glanced at it once and said, "This is what you waste your time on." "No." "Good job." "No." "I'm proud of you." Just that flat stare that made my heart drop like a broken kite. That was the day I stopped showing him anything. That was the day I learned love had to be earned, not given. But now I knew the truth. It had never been about me. It was about her. Jaya. Her body, her choices, her defiance. And I was the living proof of her disobedience. I wasn't a son to him. I was a scar he never asked for. And yet, he still raised me, fed me, paid for my education, put a roof over my head. Why? That question clawed at me as I walked up to our house, his house. I had to ask him, even if I didn't want the answer. He was in the garden, alone, pruning a rose bush that hadn't bloomed in years. He didn't look up when I said, "We need to talk." He just kept trimming dead petals, like he was cutting away everything he never said. "Did you go see him?" he asked, still not looking at me. "Yes," I said. "His house is full of music. Yours is full of silence." A twitch in his jaw, the only sign that it stung. "I gave you a life," he said. "He gave you nothing. He gave me the truth." He turned now, eyes dark with something that might have once been regret. Or maybe just exhaustion. "I should have sent you away," he muttered. "But your mother begged me. She begged you to love me? She begged me to let you stay." There it was. The truth. The core of it. I was never wanted. I was a negotiation. I was a deal. She made me promise, he continued, that I'd raise you like my own. That I'd give you my name. So I did. "No," I said, shaking. "You didn't raise me. You kept me. There's a difference." He stepped forward now, voice low. "I gave up everything for her. My pride. My reputation. My family's name. Do you know what they called me when she gave birth just 7 months after the wedding?" I didn't answer. "They called me a fool. Said I was raising another man's mistake." My chest tightened. "I wasn't a mistake," I said, each word shaking. "No," he said bitterly. "You were her rebellion." The silence that followed felt like drowning. And then he added quietly, "I didn't know how to love you, because you reminded me of how much she didn't love me." That broke something in me. I sat down on the garden bench, suddenly too tired to hold my anger. "I loved her too," I said. "But she lied to me. And now she's gone. And all I have left is you. And him. And none of it makes sense." He sat beside me. Slowly. Painfully. And for the first time in 27 years, Sudeep Roy whispered, "I didn't mean to hate you." I didn't answer. Because I didn't know if that was enough. Because part of me still wanted to hear, "I'm sorry." But I knew he wouldn't say it. Sudeep Roy was a man stitched together with pride and silence. Apologies didn't come easily to men like him. So I stood up. And just before I left, I said, "I used to think you were cold because you were broken. Now I know, you were cold because you chose to be." He didn't follow me. Didn't call out. But as I reached the gate, he said one thing, just one. "I kept the letters. The ones she wrote him." I turned. He nodded toward the house. "They're in the old study drawer. Read them if you want. Or burn them. I don't care anymore." He walked back to the rose bush. And for a brief second I wondered, what would have happened if he had just looked at me like a father, once? Would I have still needed the truth? Or would I have been content with a lie? Back in the study, I found the drawer. Inside, a bundle of letters tied with red thread. Dozens of them. Yellowed with time. All addressed to Animesh Dutta. All unopened. He never sent them. He kept them hidden. Trapped. Just like me. I sat there, holding a piece of my mother's heart that never reached the man she loved. And for the first time in days, I wept. Not because of betrayal. Not because of anger. But because love, true love, should never be this quiet. Some places feel like they remember you before you ever arrive. Shantiniketan wasn't mine. But the moment I stepped off the bus again, the red dust on my shoes felt more honest than the marble floors I grew up walking on. It didn't pretend to be anything. Maybe that's why I came back. Because I was tired of pretending. Tired of holding my breath in rooms where I was raised but never seen. Tired of grieving people who were still alive. Tired of calling my ache, anger, just to survive. I hadn't called Animesh. I didn't have to. When I walked past the banyan tree, he was already there. Waiting. Like he knew. He was sitting with the sitar in his lap, but not playing it. Just holding it. He looked up. Our eyes met again. Not with drama. Not with a rush of answers. Just silence. And I think that was the most honest thing in the world. Come, he said gently, patting the floor beside him. I made lemon tea. I sat. Neither of us spoke for a while. He poured tea into 2 clay cups. The steam rose between us like a curtain we were both afraid to pull aside. Finally, I said, I read the letters. He didn't ask which ones. Didn't even look surprised. She wrote every month, he said quietly. Sometimes 2-3 times. I never got them. I know. He kept them. He closed his eyes like the ache had lived there too long. I thought she stopped loving me, he whispered. I looked away. She didn't. We sat like that for what felt like hours. 2 men who shared the same blood but not the same past. 2 strangers bound by a woman who taught us both how to love and how to ache. I took the letters out of my bag, some of them, at least. Animesh touched them like they were sacred. One in particular made him pause. He unfolded it, slowly, hands trembling. Then read aloud, voice breaking. I see him grow, Ani. He hums when he builds things with his hands. You would love that about him. He doesn't know he's building his own heart piece by piece, but he is. Just like he used to. He stopped reading. Tears pooled in his eyes but didn't fall. She never stopped painting me in her words, he said. Even when the world erased me. I wanted to be angry at him. Still. Somewhere inside. But how do you stay angry at a man who grieves your childhood in silence? A man who lost the woman he loved, the son he never held, and the years that no one will give back? You could have fought harder, I said. I know, he said, voice rough. You could have found me. I tried once, he whispered. I came to Kolkata. I stood outside your school gates. But you looked so much like her. I couldn't breathe. And I was a coward. I didn't forgive him. But I understood. That night, I stayed in his home. It was small. Quiet. Full of old things that hummed with stories. He showed me photos of his youth. Of his music group. Of Jaya, barefoot and laughing, sitting on a fallen tree, wearing the same red bindi she used to kiss onto my forehead before school. She never smiled like that again, I said. He nodded. She never wrote music again either. Later, I stood outside, staring at the stars above the open sky. For the first time in a long time, I felt something settle in me, not peace, exactly. But possibility. Of healing. Of letting go. Of remembering without bleeding. But as I walked back inside, I noticed something in a drawer by his bed, a folded paper, old and crumpled. I shouldn't have read it. But I did. It was a court order. Petition for visitation rights, denied. Filed, 2003 petitioner, Animesh Dutta respondent, Sudeep Roy. My legs gave out beneath me. He had tried. And Sudeep had stopped him. Blocked him legally. Erased him deliberately. I wasn't hidden from the truth. I was kept from it. I showed Animesh the paper. He sighed. Not in shock, but in remembrance. I never wanted to fight her family, he said. I knew they'd destroy me in court. They had power. And I had a guitar. But why didn't she tell me? He didn't answer immediately. Then finally he said, maybe she didn't want you to choose between us. Maybe she thought, if you loved him, you'd be safer. And that's when it hit me. My mother didn't lie to protect herself. She lied to protect me from the truth, because truth isn't always a light. Sometimes it's a fire. And I wasn't ready for fire. Not then. Maybe not even now. But the embers were already burning. And they weren't going out anytime soon. And it wasn't letting up anytime soon. Sometimes truth arrives not like a light, but like a whisper behind a locked door. And once you open it, There's no way to close it again. That night I couldn't sleep. Animesh had gone to bed early. His home was small, just one fan creaking in the ceiling, walls lined with fading books and wooden instruments that had outlived the hands that played them. But inside me, there was a sound far louder than creaking fans or night crickets. It was the sound of all my unasked questions. And I knew, if I didn't ask them now, I never would. So I knocked gently on his door. He opened it, fully awake. He knew. He had been waiting too. We sat across from each other again. Father and son, but strangers still. The air between us was intense. It was tender. Like both of us had stopped pretending we weren't breaking inside. I want to know everything, I said. He nodded. Then began, slowly, carefully, like peeling a wound he had stitched shut years ago. I met your mother when we were just kids, he said. She was 16. I was 19. We were both in a poetry workshop under the banyan tree at Visvabharati. She hated my music. He chuckled softly. Said it distracted her writing. But I kept playing. She kept coming back. He described her the way no one else ever had. Not as a wife. Not as a mother. But as a person. Jaya. Fierce. Loud. Beautiful. Restless. She wanted a life that didn't exist yet, he said. One where love was enough. Where being with an artist wasn't a failure in her family's eyes. But it wasn't that simple. She was a Banerjee girl. Upper caste. Well-connected. Her father was in government service. Me? He smiled bitterly. My father was a retired headmaster who sold his medals to buy my first sitar. I listened. And I saw her, my mother, not as a saint or liar, but as a young girl trapped by time and tradition. She tried to run away once, Animesh whispered. We planned it for weeks. But the night before we were supposed to leave, her brother came to my house with 4 men. They beat me. Broke 2 of my fingers. He held up his hand. I hadn't noticed before. His pinky was slightly bent, like it never healed right. She begged her family not to file charges. In return, she promised to marry whoever they chose. That whoever was Siddhi Puroy. I said nothing. Because what do you say when your mother's love story was buried under bruises? She wrote to me until the wedding, he continued. And then, silence. I thought that was the end. But 7 months later, I saw a baby announcement in the newspaper. My heart stopped. I went to the hospital that day. Pretended to be a relative. I saw you. You were so small. He paused here. His voice cracked. You were crying. But she was smiling. Holding you like you were the only thing left in the world that hadn't betrayed her. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. But I held them back. I tried to see you once, he said. When you were 5. I waited outside your school. You were playing in the dirt. Alone. Drawing something with a stick. I remembered that. Vaguely. The way a half-dream returns when you smell something familiar. I went home and wrote a song that night, he said. It was the first piece I'd composed in years. Do you want to hear it? I nodded. He stood, opened a dusty case, and took out his sitar. The moment his fingers touched the strings, the room changed. The notes weren't just sounds. They were stories. Lullabies never sung. Hugs never given. Letters never sent. His music wasn't just beautiful. It was a confession. When the last note faded, we both just sat in the silence. Then he looked at me and said something I wasn't ready for. I never blamed her. But you had every right to, I said. She did what she could. She tried to love you and survive at the same time. Sometimes those things don't happen together. That line hit something raw in me. Because deep down, I knew I had spent years resenting her for the things she couldn't say, rather than what she did. Maybe silence wasn't betrayal. Maybe silence was the price she paid for loving both me and her mistakes. And yet, even as clarity dawned, something inside me refused to let go of the pain. Because I had no childhood photos with this man. No memories. No birthdays. No scolding. No laughter. Just absence. Silence. Music. He was a ghost with my eyes. And now, I didn't know how to love him without resenting the void he left behind. Before I left the next morning, he handed me something wrapped in cloth. It was a tape recorder. Old. Scarred. Loved. "There's a recording on it," he said. "The night you were born, I made this. It's just me talking to you. I didn't know if I'd ever get to play it for you. But now..." He stopped, eyes glistening. I didn't hug him. Not yet. But I took the recorder and whispered, "Thank you." On the train ride back to Kolkata, I played it. It was scratchy. Soft. But his voice came through. "Aaron. That's your name. I wanted to be the first to say it out loud. I don't know what the world will be like when you grow up. I don't know if I'll be there. But I want you to know, even if I'm never in your pictures, you've always been in my heart." I closed my eyes and let myself cry. Because for the first time in my life, I felt seen by a man who never saw me grow. Sometimes the hardest truths come not in loud confessions, but in whispers hidden between pages. Back home, still heavy from my talk with Mira, I found myself in my mother's old study, a dusty room frozen in time. I wasn't looking for answers. I wasn't expecting anything. But then I saw it. A small, leather-bound book lying on the shelf. The spine cracked. The pages yellowed. Inside, taped to the inside cover, was a folded letter, one I had never seen. Hands trembling, I unfolded it. The handwriting was familiar, my mother's. But this letter wasn't addressed to Animesh. Or to Sudeep. It was addressed to me. "My dearest Aaron," it began. "If you are reading this, then perhaps I am no longer there to tell you myself. I want you to know that you were born from love, fierce, complicated, and often broken, but love nonetheless. I never told you everything because I wanted to protect you from pain that no child should carry. Your father, Sudeep, was a man torn between duty and heart. He raised you with all the love he knew, even if it was buried beneath years of bitterness and regret. Animesh was the song that played in my heart before the world forced me to be silent. I never stopped loving him, but I chose the life I thought would keep you safe. This story is not about betrayal or blame. It's about survival. And the hope that one day, you will find peace in the fragments of our past. Please forgive me for the silences. And know that every beat of my heart was for you. With all my love, always, your mother, Jaya." I sank into the old chair. The weight of her words crushed and comforted me all at once. For years I had battled ghosts and shadows, 2 fathers, 1 mother, a wedding day nightmare. But in this letter, I found the truth that had always eluded me. Love is never simple. Love is messy. Love is sacrifice. I looked up, thinking of Mira. Of Animesh. Of Sudeep. Of the little boy who once built heart pieces from broken dreams. And I realized healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about embracing it. I stood, folded the letter gently, and placed it back in the book. The night was quiet outside, but inside me, something shifted. A small flame, fragile and uncertain, but alive.